Need more energy throughout the day? Looking for a kick to your workout? RockinThatIDLife.com has you covered with delicious flavors you've grown to love in tropical fruit and mixed berry, but now fall in love with the new fruit punch and orange flavors. Try them all at RockinThatIDLife.com.
Realtor Mike Burgoyne with Real Brokerage LLC makes the moving process easier. Work with a realtor who plays and studies the game and will work as hard as the boys on the ice to get you the best deal. Check out Mike on the web at strikewithmike.com and jumpstart your move today. That's strikewithmike.com.
Welcome to the second week of the Let's Go Blues Radio Summer Series. I'm Jeff Ponder, your host. Thanks for tuning in this week as we roll into May. Yes, playoff hockey's still going, folks. Exciting stuff. We'll get to that in a minute. Support for Let's Go Blues Radio is brought to you in part by RockinThatIDLife.com, where we help you make every workout, every meal count, do life better. And by Mike Burgoyne of Real Brokerage Realty. Use strikewithmike.com to search for properties in your area and to contact Mike, who will help you put your dream home, in your dream home or sell your current home. And by Center Ice Brewery, which serves St. Louis with flavorful hockey-themed beer. Find your favorite new brew at local grocery and liquor stores throughout the St. Louis area. This is franchise episode number 412 all time. This is season 12, episode 2. We have a special guest, and we'll get to him in a minute. But first, you know what? Let's do drink of the episode. It is early Wednesday morning, so I am not having a beer. I have my rock. It's hard to see. I always have trouble showing stuff like this. This is my Rockin' That ID Life, the one that tastes like Tang, the orange flavor. Very good. I do not like orange drinks that much, but for whatever reason, this Tang flavor, so good. I know I mentioned it before that Dustin Paul made me try it, and I tried it. I'm like, okay, fine. You're right, man. I'll give it a shot. I'll buy my own. Now I buy them every round, every time I want one. So again, check that out, RockinThatIDLife.com. If you're interested, it's something I drink every day. I drink the energy. It's great. It gives me a pick-me-up in the morning. I have another one in the afternoon, and it gets me through the day. I don't need coffee. I don't need soda. It's fantastic. Let's start talking about a little hockey here, shall we? Our show, right, Jeff? Shut up. Let's talk about a little playoff action going on. So first of all, celebrate St. Louis, right? Boston and Colorado have been eliminated. Who would have thought that after one round of hockey, we'd be saying that? We all know Boston had the 43-point advantage over Florida. It was a record-setting season for them. They just looked like barnstormers. I would be interested to see the percentage of people in the bracket challenge overall, not just ours, Let's Go Blues Radios, but how many people picked them to win the whole thing, because they look like they were destined. And it was same with Tampa just a couple of years ago, right? Sergei Bobrovsky stood in their way too. So just crazy stuff. And we already got the second round rolling in, but man, no Boston, no Colorado. They were the hands down favorite. That was one of those series where I did actually see some people giving love to Florida. Like, oh, possibly, maybe. They were the President's Trophy winners last year. No one gave Seattle a chance. And they played some great hockey down the stretch against Colorado. They had a great Game 7. Philip Grubauer was ridiculous against his former team. I can't believe I'm rooting for that guy, but I have to. Just unbelievable stuff from him. And then just timely scoring. Bjorkstrand in that last game, he had like 3 hit posts and 2 goals. Dude should have had 5 goals on the night. Just an unbelievable effort from the Seattle Kraken, and we're excited to see how they match up against Dallas, which, hey, let's talk a little. We'll talk about Dallas here a little bit. So kind of fallout from the Rangers Game 7 loss to the Devils on Monday night. So because of that, the Blues' first-round pick acquired in the Tarasenko deal will officially be Dallas's first-round pick, currently at number 25. So if you remember that condition, it was basically whatever the Rangers had 2 first-round picks, whichever one would be the higher one, as in like 25, 26, 27, like the highest one, that would go to the Blues, and the Rangers would maintain their lower pick. So it's a little confusing, and I get it. But basically, the Rangers, they acquired a pick from Dallas on September 19th of last year, and they sent Niels Lundqvist to Lundqvist. I'm probably saying his name wrong. They sent him to Dallas, who he did play for them this year. But yeah, they. I want to set the record straight for some Blues fans, because I actually did see people kind of celebrating this and saying, wow, this trade just keeps getting better and better. And, oh, we get a pick from Dallas. And I don't know. I'm just reading between the lines, and maybe it's somebody listening to our show. I got the sense with people celebrating this thing that it's like they think they're getting an additional first-round pick. No, they still have 3. They're going to have 3 unless they make a trade before the draft and acquire another one, which I don't know how that would happen. But this does not mean the Blues are getting an additional first-round pick. It just means that the conditions have played out, and the Blues now know which pick they will be getting. Dallas will be picking higher, so they will be picking with Dallas's pick. So what does that mean, Blues fans? I know everyone who listens to this show knows that I root for the Stars. I lived there for a short period of my life. I don't like it, but I do. Now I feel like I have to root against them. We have to root against Dallas, because if they lose, the sooner they lose, the better the pick will be for the Blues. So all you got to do right now, folks, is root for Seattle, I guess, especially in that series, and hope that Dallas can be taken out, because that will be nice for the Blues to be able to pick a little bit higher if Dallas gets knocked out. So no, it's not an additional pick, but it is still, a first-round pick, so in a very deep draft. I also wanted to talk about that trade that I just mentioned, the trade with the New York Rangers with Tarasenko and Mikkola heading over there earlier this season. So Tarasenko, when it's all said and done, because the Rangers are out, they're done, there's a chance Tarasenko returns, and if that happens, we'll rediscuss this trade. But how it looks right now, Vladimir Tarasenko as a New York Ranger, 38 games played, and this includes playoffs, 11 goals, 14 assists, 25 points. He had 3 goals and 1 assist in the postseason, and 8 goals and 21 points in the regular season, all with New York. That's just New York numbers. It doesn't include his numbers with the Blues. Mikkola, total with the Rangers, 38 games played, 1 goal, 4 assists, 2 assists in the postseason. Now let's flip the tables and look at how Sammy Blais did. Sammy Blais, total with the Blues, 31 games played, all regular season, obviously, 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. So in terms of regular season, Vladimir Tarasenko outscored Blais by 1 point, 21 points to 20. But Blais had the upper hand in goals, which is what Tarasenko was brought in for. 9 goals versus Tarasenko's 8. And then if you factor it all in with 7 additional games with the playoffs, Tarasenko, 25 points, Blais, 20. Small sample size, right? But this is, let's just say, Vladimir Tarasenko and Niko Mikkola do not end up returning to the Rangers, especially Tarasenko. This is what the trade in the end will look like. The Blues get an outperforming Blais and a restricted free agent in Hunter Skinner. We'll see what they do with him. Dallas's 2023 first-round pick. And then because the Rangers made the playoffs this year, which we all knew they would, that 4th-rounder in 2024 in that trade has now become a 3rd-rounder. So they've acquired a 2024 3rd-round pick. The Rangers might end up with nothing. They got Tarasenko and Mikkola, who brought them, sure, into a high playoff seed. I'm sure that helped. But at the end of the day, they didn't go anywhere. They lost they won as many series this year as the Blues. So Blues might have just gotten away with a steal. For all the Rangers fans saying that this was a home run by the New York Rangers, that may not be the case. Blues might have snuck away with a victory in this trade for sure. We'll see. Again, I think we revisit this trade if Tarasenko or Mikkola resigns, and they go on a deep run next year. But right now, as it stands, advantage Blues. There's no other way to look at it. Sammy Blais has been a revelation on this team. So gotta love that as a Blues fan, seeing such a big win for a team buying Vladimir Tarasenko, going all in on him. And Blues, in the short term even, might end up with the better end of this trade. I mean, that's crazy thing. A great stroke of brilliance from Doug Armstrong, if you ask me. A couple other news I want to get to very quick before we head into talking to our guest. The Blues have signed prospect Leo Loof, who we talked about last week with Vanessa Graff. He's been signed to a 3-year entry-level deal. He was drafted by the Blues in the 3rd round, number 88 overall in 2020. 2 seasons with, I'm going to say, Ilves of Liga in Finland. He has 8 goals and 18 assists in 103 games played. He also earned a bronze medal with Sweden in the 2022 World Junior Championships, under 18 World Junior Championships. And we talked about him, like I said, last week with Stephanie Graff. She said Army will want to bring him over to the North American game sooner rather than later because they think they got something in this kid. Here we are, not even a week later, he gets signed to a big league contract. So we will see him in the AHL next year. Who knows if he outperforms? Maybe we'll see him on a retooling Blues team at some point next year. But I see him getting at least a full season with the Thunderbirds before we see anything like that. But maybe a hidden gem here with the Blues. We'll see. But very exciting to hear. And if you did not listen to our episode last week talking with Vanessa Graff, we did break down Leo Loof a little bit and his progression, where he's at, and how soon we might see him in the NHL. So make sure you check that out. Well, we're talking prospects again, folks. Why not, right? We're a retooling team. We're talking about draft picks right now. Where are the Blues going to pick this year? Next week's the draft lottery. We'll get to that later. So we talk with Will MacLaren, who is a very intelligent hockey writer for the Hockey News, the print version, as well as the QMJHL's website. So he reports on the Q. And obviously, the Q have some pretty important Blues prospects who currently, by the way, there's 4 teams left in the Q's playoffs. All 3 of these prospects are still playing. So Zach Dean, Zachary Bolduc, and Marc-Andre Gaudet, who we called Gaudet last week on the show, but unfortunately it's Gaudet, so it's a little easier to pronounce than some people might think. But anyway, so yeah, we're excited to kind of learn about these guys, and we'll have more with Will here in a minute. So it was awesome having him on. We had a good 40-minute discussion about these prospects and where they're at and what Blues fans can expect in the next couple of years from these guys. Quick reminder that we have our all-time team reveals starting this month. So in just 2 weeks, actually, unless some breaking news happens with the Blues, then in 2 weeks we'll have our first reveal show. And that will be the left-handed D. So you will be able to see where your votes rank in your Twitter poll. So remember, go over to our Twitter page at LGB Radio, vote on the polls. Right now, we've got one up. If you're listening to this on Wednesday or Thursday, right-handed D, the first poll is up, and that is Al McInnes, Bob Plager, and Rob Ramage. So who belongs on the all-time team out of those 3, or do all of them belong? We'll find out. But go ahead and vote. Tell us which one you think belongs, and we will reveal your results very soon for right-hand D. But again, in 2 weeks, that left-handed D show is coming up. So make sure you vote. If you're not on Twitter, you can go over to our Facebook page, and we'll have a link up there on how to get to the Twitter page and go ahead and make your vote. And then again, always remember to comment on the Twitter poll as well. If you're on Facebook, just comment in the Twitter link on the post there. And best comments win prizes. We've got plenty of prizes to give away this summer. So I'll admit, it's been thin. We haven't gotten a lot of comments. We've gotten a lot of votes, but not a lot of comments on why people are voting the way they are. So jump in there. You got a good chance to win a prize this year. So get in there. Let's see it. Well, we are going to take a quick break for commercial. So when we come back, you will hear from our new friend of the show, Will MacLaren, to talk about the Q prospects, Bolduc, Dean, and Gaudet.
We'll return after these messages.
Every beer league hockey night, I grab my hockey bag and sticks and throw them in the trunk of my car. And the very next thing I do, I mix up a boost of energy courtesy of RockinThatIDLife.com. It's formulated to break up its delivery in 3 ways, which helps me get through all 3 periods of hockey. Phase 1 provides a rapid onset of energy, concentration, alertness, and motivation. By period 2, I'm receiving a dose of sustained energy, increased focus, metabolism, cognitive function, performance, and feelings of well-being, which I need with the way I play. In Phase 3, I'm getting fatigue protection without jitters and crash, an elevated mood, and a reduction of fluid retention to help me make the big play when it counts. This same triphasic approach helps me when I drink it during work hours or simply just for a pick-me-up when I need it. Try one of the 4 energy flavors by visiting RockinThatIDLife.com, but make sure to email Dustin at RockinThatIDLife@gmail.com and tell him Let's Go Blues Radio sent you to receive an additional 10% off your order. That's RockinThatIDLife.com.
Center Ice Brewery is a beer lover's dream for hockey fans. Based in St. Louis, Missouri, owner Steve Albers has been brewing hockey-themed favorites for thirsty sports fans since 2017. From the Beauty IPA to the Old Arena Lager, a cold, frosty, hockey-themed beer is just what the doctor ordered for hockey fans in St. Louis. Make sure to check your local beer store for Center Ice Brewery beer today. LGB. Let's go beer.
During the magical 2019 playoff run, I was in the midst of buying my current home. Every time I spoke with my realtor, obviously, home buying was the discussion. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop thinking about what was destined to happen for our St. Louis hockey team. If only there were a realtor who could have walked me through the process, held my hand when needed, but was there to be a sounding board when I wanted to complain about a certain hand pass goal. Let realtor Mike Burgoyne with Real Brokerage be that for you. He'll have your needs top of mind as he skates you through the home buying or selling process, dangling you past any obstacles and assisting on all your home goals. Check out strikewithmike.com for more information or give him a call directly at 314-753-4060. That's Mike Burgoyne with Real Brokerage at strikewithmike.com, and that number again is 314-753-4060. Don't forget to tell Mike that Let's Go Blues Radio sent you.
And now, back to Let's Go Blues Radio, the longest running St. Louis Blues podcast with Price, Ponder, and Day.
And we are back from break, and I am joined by a special guest on today's show, Will MacLaren, a writer at the QMJHL and the Hockey News and co-host of the Hockey News on the Q podcast. Will is here to talk about some Blues prospects as well as the current Q playoffs that are going on right now. Will, thank you very much for joining us at Let's Go Blues Radio.
All right, Jeff. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. And yeah, certainly a lot to talk about. The Blues in the past have not shied away from drafting out of the queue, and there's a number of prospects still alive in the Gilles Courteau Trophy playoffs that are worth mentioning as the race to the final heats up here in Q land.
So let's talk a little bit about you to get started, because you were telling me before we started recording here, you've been reporting on the Q for a while. Clearly, the Q has produced some pretty incredible players, from Guy Lafleur to Pierre Turgeon, which Blues fans are very familiar with, Nathan MacKinnon, Sidney Crosby, even Thomas Chabot is another name that comes to mind. For you reporting, what NHL talent have you seen at the Q that you were just like, this kid's going to make it, this kid's great, and clearly you were right? I know a name like Crosby comes to mind, but I want to hear your answer.
Well, definitely Crosby is the first name that comes to mind for me, not just because he is the most talented junior level player that I've seen come through the Q, and probably still top 2 or 3. I'd say, definitely Connor Bedard would give him a run for his money, but that's certainly not a knock against Sid. And I'm not just saying that because I actually live in Sid's hometown of Cole Harbour, Nova Scotia. But beyond all that, I've been covering the Q in one way, shape, or form for about 18 years. been following it for, and I hate dating myself like this, but about 20, 28, 29 years, pretty much since the league first came to the Atlantic provinces here in Canada. And obviously, you could talk about the McKinnons, the guy like Alexander Radulov as well, guys who were superstars at the junior level, and you just knew they were going to be in the NHL. And in the case of some of the higher ranked guys that probably could have been taking a regular shift in the NHL in their last year of junior, if not for the rules around the NHL draft. But for me, and I'll actually keep this kind of Blues centric. A couple of guys, amongst others, that stick out to me. That the first time I saw both of these guys, they remind me of guys in the past who just had the overall game, the 200-foot game. They were skilled with the puck. They're skilled away from the puck. And although they were not quite as highly touted as your McKinnons, as your Crosbys, what have you, you knew that they could be special at the NHL level. And they both came into the league the same year in Moncton. I originally from Moncton, New Brunswick. Ivan Barbashev and Dmitry Jaskin. They were line mates in Moncton for one season. Jaskin was with us for one season. Barbashev for two. Three seasons with the Wildcats, and they always brought that that grittier game, but also highly skilled offensively. And of course, we saw Ivan celebrating with the Stanley Cup back in 2019 with the Blues, and it's things like that make you proud to follow the league. Knowing that you saw this kid really develop. Some of his key formative years were spent with you calling the action or writing about them. And that's just two. And I'll actually throw in a third name there, keeping the Nova Scotia theme alive. And it was actually came to my mind from talking about time in Moncton and, of course, Ivan Barbashev, Brad Marchand, who, of course, everybody loves Brad Marchand. He is such a likable talent out there. Very modest, diminutive, and despite not having a loud voice and not playing that in your face style that other guys do. So you can stop me at any time, Jeff.
Keep going.
Never thought this would go this far, but at the end of the day, there's a guy who I think epitomizes what you can do. And it's going to sound weird for anybody who's followed him in his NHL career, but anybody who has the right attitude. And I know there's probably a few people who are saying, Brad Marchand, right attitude, like you should end the interview now. But it's not quite the case. He's a kid who actually came to Moncton as a 16-year-old, a veteran-laden Wildcats team. Didn't look like there was going to be a spot for him on the roster, and he went into the coach's room. Coach wanted to chat with him about where he saw himself in future years with the team. And Brad came out and said, well, when I make this team this year, he said, I'm going to basically do everything I can to become one of the best players in the league. And coaches just sort of looked at each other as if to say, this year? And he wasn't even the most highly touted player off of his under 18 team when he got drafted into the Q. And sure enough, he came in. He literally out-hustled an established player for their spot in the roster. He ended up being a solid prospect at 16 and a burgeoning star at 17, and that's what got him drafted to the Boston Bruins. So, for all that you can say about a guy like Brad Marchand, in a lot of ways, he could be the poster boy for some of the talent that comes through the Quebec League and really all of the CHL that doesn't necessarily get the notoriety while they're playing junior or even while they're playing semi-pro. But eventually they make that name for themselves once they get to the top run.
Yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, I'm glad you've seen Ivan Barbashev because Another question I really wanted to ask you about was when this trade happened for the Blues, sending Ivan Barbashev to the Vegas Golden Knights. Clearly, you covered Barbashev. Now you're covering Zachary Dean. When you saw this trade go through, what were your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts were it's very well suited for both teams. And I'll be honest with you, and again, not a knock against Ivan, who's I've enjoyed watching Ivan play since he was 17 years old. But I was a little bit surprised that the Golden Knights were willing to let go of a guy like Zach Dean, mainly because Zach Dean is a lot like Ivan Barbashev, but he's 7 or 8 years younger. From a contractual standpoint, obviously that makes a big difference, especially for the Golden Knights, who are always, playing that wicked dance with the salary cap. But beyond that, like I say, I did a profile piece on Zach for the Hockey News back in the fall, and talking with their director of player personnel. He could not, even trying to sort of jostle him for, okay, where do you see a player like Zachary? Where do you think he could improve? What are some of the things that you told him to come back to junior and work on? Either he was keeping the best poker face ever, or he legitimately felt that in the case of Zach Dean, it was much more a case of refining the already solid talents that he has. And if you're a Blues fan, you're not only going to enjoy watching this player come through your organization, you're going to enjoy what he does to the opposition, because he makes the opposition's life very miserable. And not through anything nefarious. Like, this isn't, he is not a dirty player in the least. He's a little bit edgy, but he's so hard to knock off the puck. He's fast. His skating is spectacular, and he's got a very low center of gravity. He's a guy who's very hard to knock down, and it's just going to annoy the opposition to no end. It happens in junior. And at the same time, he's a guy who can put up a point a game at the junior level as well. And Zach Dean, when he came to the Q, he was highly touted. He was drafted 4th overall by Gatineau. And he came to the league with a reputation as an offensive star. And at the under 18 level, he was averaging, I believe, about 2 points a game for a very reputable league. He's originally from Newfoundland, but he was playing in a league in Toronto against some pretty stiff talent and averaging, well over a point a game, probably close to 2 points a game. And that first year, you can see that offense really starting to click. And then going into a second year, Gatineau changed coaches. They brought in a guy named Louis Robitaille. And Louis preaches a two-way game. And he saw the potential in Zach to really hone that 200-foot game. And this is another reason why people are going to love him in St. Louis, especially the coaching staff. Zach was able to accept that message, which, let's face it, Jeff, when you're 17 years old and you have been the sniper on your team all the way through up to this point, it's pretty hard sometimes to accept the fact that your coach wants you to back check a little bit more. But Zach assumed that role, and in the process, he assumed a leadership role in Gatineau. He's now one of the assistant captains with the Olympic. The Olympic ended up, I believe they did end up as the number 1 ranked junior team in Canada this year, and for good reason. He's in a very tough battle against the Quebec Remparts in the semifinal right now against another guy who we will be talking about, I have no doubt, very shortly, and Zachary Bolduc. But he is just so efficient, and he can play up and down the lineup. He was a first liner for a long time in Gatineau. Gatineau made a series of deals at Christmas. He's now on line 1A, let's call it, but he's not on the clear-cut first line anymore, and that's fine. he represented Team Canada at the World Juniors. He's a third liner, and quite frankly, he really had to hustle his way onto that team. And at the end of it all, he became one of the most effective forwards, alongside another Q guy who's an Anaheim prospect in Nathan Gauthier, on that very stingy Team Canada checking line. So, and that tells you everything you need to know about Zach Dean. He doesn't necessarily care where he plays. He wants to play, and he's going to do whatever the assignment is to bring the team success. And if that doesn't make him a bona fide prospect, well, nothing does.
Yeah, I mean, the terminology that I've seen when talking about him is breakneck pace. And I think that speaks to multiple areas, right? Like, not only is he quick, but he's a guy who's going to force turnovers and force just the other team to really think what they're going to do, because he's always going to be in your face, and he's always going to, and it sounds like he's picked up that defensive side of his game, which is, I mean, like you said already, the Blues coaching staff is going to love that in camp.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you've seen, like, we all saw the Blues win the Cup in 2019. You saw the guys that Craig Berube was throwing over the boards night after night. You know, your O'Reillys, your Barbashevs, just to name a couple right off the top of the head. But Zach Dean fits that mold, in as much as, and that's not a comment on his skills, comparing him to any one of those players or anybody else in the organization per se, but it does speak to his willingness to accept whatever roles forced through his way, or whatever role is given to him. He's very accepting of it. And again, like you say, breakneck speed is a pretty good way to describe it. He's very quick. And in fact, you talk about that edginess. Sometimes that quickness can sometimes lead to maybe a bit more edginess than what you'd like to see sometimes as Zach Dean. I'm thinking specifically the first game of the World Juniors this year against Czechia, where he was called for a hit from behind. He got 5 in a game. It was a solid hit more than anything. It was not, it was a guy hitting another guy into the end wall with speed. Not even so much as a charge per se. You probably could have called it 2 for charging, but it just looked like a violent hit because Zach Dean is a very fast player. He plays the game at very very high tempo, and as a result, he did get 5 in the game. But I mean, it's something that's really telling. Anybody who's watched a lot of IHF events over the years and know how suspensions work at tournaments like that, he actually didn't get suspended. So, which is 5 in a game, that's generally a ticket to sit out at least a game, and that didn't happen with him. Quite frankly, because when you looked at it in real time, that's a borderline dirty hit by Zach Dean. No, he knew what he was doing. He just did it really fast.
Right. Yep. So right now we talk about his pace. We talk about his ability to get on the forecheck and defend. But you said it earlier as well. He came in as a goal scorer. He is a guy that's going to put up points. And currently, we are talking on May 1st. Currently, he is leading the playoffs in the Q in points, which is just, I mean, you think about the talent in this league, and there's 4 teams left, and he's leading. Has he turned his game up another notch in the playoffs, or is this just what you expect from Zach Dean?
Yes, to both. He's, he does have big game experience relative whatever level he's played at. Like, even going back to his days playing under 15 hockey in Newfoundland, he's been involved in regional championships and scored big goals during those events. And that same MO has just carried through with him all the way through his development. Again, we saw it at the World Juniors. Was Zach Dean the most clear-cut talented guy. Were there guys that are arguably more talented who didn't make the roster? I think it's a safe bet to say yes, but he fit a certain role. He's versatile. He can play center and wing. For example, the leading scorer in the regular season was a guy named Jordan Dumais, who plays down the road from me here in Halifax. Dumais had 140 points. He was an offensive threat seemingly every time he jumped over the boards. But he's a winger, and he couldn't, and he's not a center. He could not fit that dual role. Therefore, there was no spot for him on Team Canada this year, especially with guys like Bedard and Gunther and Joshua Waugh, who were just who just pretty much had their spots set in stone. A guy like Zach Dean not only had the willingness to play up and down the lineup, mostly down, to be honest with you, but he also had the adaptability. He could go to the wing and he could handle those assignments very easily, which by nature he should be able to, because being a defensive center is obviously a little bit more challenging than being a defensive winger. But at the end of the day, he took the assignment. And as far as answering your question about the offensive output, this year in the Quebec League, there are basically 4 very strong teams. There's Gatineau, Sherbrooke, Quebec, and Halifax. And be honest with you, those 4 teams were head and shoulders over the other 14 teams in the league. So, for example, Zach Dean, before this round started, his team has gone 8-1 in the playoffs. Some of them one-sided, some of them very one-sided. So he did rack up the points as a result, but at the end of the day, that shouldn't diminish what he's done so far. The natural ability for him to put up those points is still evident. And quite frankly, I think offensively, especially in the second half of this season, he was getting overlooked a little bit because, as mentioned, a number of trades happened in Gatineau. They put together a very strong first line with a couple of NHL prospects. There's Buffalo prospect Olivier Nadeau, Montreal Canadiens prospect Riley Kidney, and they're playing with Philadelphia prospect named Alexis Gendron. Those 3 came together and formed arguably the most potent line this side of Bedard in Major Junior in the second half of the regular season. And Zach Dean was really relied upon more for secondary scoring. That line, especially in the second round of the playoffs, that very potent line, kind of dried up a little bit during the second round against Drummondville. Zach Dean brought his offensive game up a notch, and that's just Zach Dean being Zach Dean. He, it's not that he will turn it off and on, but when he realizes that the pressure to perform is a little bit higher, and maybe if there's somebody else on the team that's kind of in a bit of a slump, Zach Dean's the guy that you can rely on, hitch your horse to, and probably ask for the proverbial 110% when he's given 100%, and you'll get the 110%.
Yeah. So on the other side of the ice from Zach Dean, you've mentioned him already, but Zachary Bolduc, another Zach on the Blues prospect depth chart. He's with the Quebec Rempart. They are currently up, I believe, 1-0 in their series. But Mr. Bolduc right now only sits at 9 points in the playoffs. So, Quebec, clearly good team. He's not putting up the points that Dean is, but what are you seeing from him this playoff?
Well, what you're getting from Zach Bolduc is a constant offensive threat. He's not known as the two-way threat that a guy like Zach Dean is, but from an offensive standpoint, he plays a very sophisticated game. His release, his shot are both pro level now. He's a back-to-back 50-goal scorer in the league, which I guess is part of the reason why I would say, Jeff, I'm not overly concerned over the somewhat lack of production. And you say, he has 9 points. Quebec has only played 10 games. in the
Good
playoffs
point.
so far. So they swept their first round opponent. They swept the Charlottetown Islanders in round one. They swept their second round opponent, the Rimouski Oceanic, and Bolduc's former team, ironically. But and they're now up 2-0 against Gatineau, with that series now shifting to back to Gatineau on Wednesday. So So anyway, for anybody who's following this and wants to follow the Q playoffs, but it's still almost a point a game. The Rampart as a whole, they haven't had quite the one-sided offensive contests that the Olympic have had in the first two rounds of their playoff journey. The Oceanic did take them to overtime here on one occasion, and Quebec very much is, and Gatineau's like this to an extent, but Quebec very much has a scoring by committee mentality, where they have three lines that could go out and do damage at any given time, as most good junior teams would have. But what we're seeing is all three of those lines are regularly contributing. And when all three are regularly contributing in the scenario in which maybe the offense is not as rampant as other teams, as a result, everybody's numbers are going to be a little bit more diminished. But Zach, I wouldn't worry about the overall stats. What I would say about him is he is a guy with all the talent in the world offensively. He's a guy who has worked on his skating, has worked on his edge work all the way through. He is, again, are you gonna have him be your number one defensive assignment taker amongst the forwards? No, but he's come a long way. And even when St. Louis drafted him in the first round, I think that was very much the case. They saw a guy with so much offensive capability that we can teach him the defense when it comes time to do so. He's got certain tools in his toolbox right now you can't teach.
Well, we had the most prolific scouting ever on this show. My co-host of the show, Kurt Price, once said after the draft, Zachary Bolduc will never play in the NHL because his name doesn't work in the NHL. He says it's not an NHL name. So I am holding him to that, and I'm like, I'm going to tell that to our Q expert and get his opinion. What do you think? Is that an NHL name?
Well, okay. Is he going to be Zachary Bolduc or is he going to be Zach Bolduc? See, that makes a big difference. I think Zach Bolduc makes the NHL. I think Zach Bolduc is borderline trend-setting name. Zachary Bolduc, you know what? I'd say maybe it's a little bit more of an uphill road for sure, based on all of these professional opinions and the exhaustive research that's gone into them. But I don't know. I see, what one person sees as impossible, I see as maybe a little revolutionary, depending on what that first name is. The hand. It all depends on the handle, Jeff. And
I'm with you. I'm with you. You know what? I'm with you. If he's Zachary, if he comes down and we look at the training camp notes and it's Zachary Bolduc, I'm like, well, maybe next year.
Yeah,
so we'll see.
Yeah. Exactly. If Bolduc ends up a year from now potting 30 in the AHL, it's because he's still Zachary. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to make sure the co-host hears this one because for sure, I think that's the right way to go. But no, in all seriousness, Bolduc, we talk about his points in the playoffs. Like you said, it's a scoring by committee on his current team. In the regular season, though, 110 points in 61 games. Clearly, he's got the offensive touch that you were talking about. And I've been reading scouting reports on this kid. He has rapid stick handling motions, takes a couple steps, can rip one on goalies. If you were to compare him to an NHL, I don't know if you want to even say sniper or just an NHL player in general, who would be some comparables to what Bolduc's ceiling would be?
Ooh. Well, I'm going to use the rash generalization on this one, Jeff, and say pick your favorite second/third liner who sees time on the second power play unit. Mainly because he will, and you know what, quite frankly, I could see him perhaps developing into a bit of a power play specialist. And my reason for saying that is, and you've already sort of alluded to it, the stick work, the quickness with his release. I say he's getting an NHL release right now. He's got an NHL shot, and he can burn you in any number of ways. You don't, if he's stationary on the power play, you don't even necessarily have to get it in his wheelhouse. You got to get it roughly in the wheelhouse, and he will find a way to put the flex on the stick and put the puck in the back of the net, and from distance as well. You know, as much as a guy like Zach Dean, for example. He's as prone to fire one from the half wall as he is to just muck around in front of the net and score the dirty goal. Zach Bolduc is scoring goal scorers goals. On the rush, same thing. And of course, he does have a number of guys around him who can get him the puck. Theo Rochette being one of the biggest ones, the captain up in Quebec, another 100-point guy. If the right person is distributing the puck to Zach Bolduc, even in stride, he will let fly with the one-timer on a little half slapper and just decimate goaltenders. 55 goals last year, another 50-goal season this year. And he's always had that ability too. And the funny thing about Zach Bolduc is he's had two things happen to him that may have, amongst other things, hampered his ranking in the draft. The first thing was he actually did not attend his first junior training camp. He was still debating whether or not he was going to maintain his NCAA eligibility. The rules in the Quebec League, the rules in the CHL are if you attend a training camp for 48 hours, or if you play in play in an exhibition game, you are no longer eligible to play in the NCAA. So he didn't go to camp. He didn't show up in Rimouski until about 3 weeks into the season as a 16-year-old. And then he went out and scored about a point a game and had 30 goals in about 55 games as a 16-year-old in what's really an 18, 19-year-old's league.
Wow.
The second thing that happened to him, this was his draft year. Well, a couple of things happened, quite frankly. First of all, that was, the season 2020-2021 was the season where that was most deeply affected by COVID, not just in junior, obviously, from the NHL all the way down. But between being scouted on essentially people's laptops as opposed to being able to be in the arenas, and also he suffered, I believe it was an appendicitis just before the playoffs in 2021, just before Rimouski was headed into the postseason. So he did not get any looks in the postseason. Add all of these factors up, and I know he still went, he went respectable. Where'd he go? 17, I believe, to the Blues in 2021. So he went 17.
Correct.
Yeah. But I mean, who's to say that, that could have changed a little bit? And I know his coach, former coach in Rimouski, Serge Bosla, I remember talking to him going into that draft. And he said, Zach's a first round player. But, I think, what we've seen over the past year or so in the circumstances is probably going to knock him down a couple of more notches, which ended up, as far as I'm concerned, name notwithstanding, I think it's definitely to the Blues' benefit for sure, because, going back to that initial comment that I made, for virtually everything that you would consider a bit of a hole in Zach Bolduc's game are holes that can be taught. Through, whether it's strength and conditioning, whether it's responsible defensive play, what have you, you can teach that. And this is a kid with a chip on his shoulder too. He was, Zach Dean was on the Canadian national team. Zach Bolduc was sent home, and Zach Bolduc was very vocal about being sent home, going so far as to make a comment about how kids from Quebec get are at an unfair disadvantage when it comes to making that team. Zach Bolduc's a kid with a chip on his shoulder, and if he can use that to his advantage, if he can learn the finer nuances of the game defensively, then that, coupled with the pro level offensive skills that he already possesses, you know what? Maybe number 17 turns into a bit of a steal.
Yeah, I agree. So we've got, let's just say, one spot on the St. Louis Blues roster that's open. Next training camp, they want to give it to a kid. They want to give it to a Zach, let's say. Who's getting it? Is it going to be Dean? Is it going to be Bolduc? Or does it just depend more on what do we need to fill at this point?
Probably does depend a lot on what you need to fill. And I will say this much, and Blues fans aren't going to like this, but just given the events of the last, half season or so, it certainly gives guys like Zach Bolduc and Zach Dean ample opportunity to have long stays in camp, maybe make an opening night roster. If I'm a coach, I'm probably picking Zach Dean, only because of the polished two-way game, the responsibility that he seems to be able to take on, and the other thing too. Zach Dean as a third or a fourth liner, at least to start his NHL career, I think, first of all, he's going to accept the assignment, but he's not going to look at a place. I think you put a guy like Zach Bolduc on the third or the fourth line on a regular basis, and I say that knowing full well that Zach Bolduc does break through into the NHL. He probably does start out on the third line, but if Zach Bolduc doesn't find a way to get himself into a top six role, or at the very least a semi-regular or a regular on the power play, then I really think that's going to almost be a waste in a way. He's never going to be able to reach potential without having people as refined offensively as him to play with, to skate with. So, if I'm going to pick one, I'm probably picking Dean, but at the end of the day, like I say, Zach Bolduc, never count out the kid with the chip on his shoulder. And
I agree with that.
Zach Bolduc very much. I mentioned Brad Marchand at the beginning of this interview. Same idea, in terms of just that the attitude of okay, so I'm not on the team now. Well, you just give it time. I'll find a way on the team. And Zach Bolduc has never had, and for a guy like Bolduc who's never had that situation crop up until Team Canada, I think it certainly got his back up. And I'm pretty sure Patrick Roy up in Quebec saw that scenario and said, Zach Bolduc playing his normal game is very effective. Zach Bolduc with his backup, now we have a real thoroughbred here. And sure enough, he just went on a tear towards the end of the season. So, like I say, don't count him out, but I'll pick Dean.
Okay, to me, that sounds like the right pick. But like you said, you never know. Bolduc could step in training camp, step in preseason, and just be lights out, and it's okay. Well, we got to go with this kid. Good Lord. So we'll see. One more prospect I did want to get a quick opinion on you about, just overall in general, someone you're seeing right now in the Q playoffs. We mentioned him earlier with the Sherbrooke Phoenix, Marc-Andre Gaudet. We talked about him last week with a friend of the show, Vanessa Graff. Picked in the 2022 fifth round, number 152 overall for the Blues, a defenseman. What are you seeing in his game during the Q playoffs right now?
Well, Marc-Andre Gaudet's a very interesting guy, largely because he was, I'm not going to say he was playing in relative obscurity, but, he was playing for the Acadie Bathurst Titans in northern New Brunswick. And he was a decent player on a strong team in 2022. Another guy who came in through the ravages of COVID, his first full season was 2020, 2021. Like I said, and as I said, it's a situation where a guy scouting players was next to impossible or a very difficult task at best. So he's a guy who just never got a lot of looks. Ended up going to Chicoutimi in the offseason. Put up nearly a point a game with the Saguenayens, and then became a very hot commodity on the trade market. Found his way to Sherbrooke. I think this was despite the fact that Marc-Andre is not a top prospect, I do think this was a very savvy pick by the Blues. I think it was a very good use of asset management during the draft. You're taking a flyer on him because, quite frankly, it's a 7-round NHL draft nowadays. It's very rare that anybody takes flyers on anybody. But you know what? You're using a lower pick, hoping for a high return. And what Marc-Andre Gaudet is bringing to the Sherbrooke Phoenix is one of the more solid two-way defensive games that nobody's talking about. He averaged a point a game the last half of the season in Sherbrooke. He's averaging almost a point a game for Sherbrooke in the playoffs for a team that is yet to lose. They're 10-0. And he's able to eat up minute after minute after minute. In fact, just watching him on the ice here in Halifax this past weekend for the opener of the semifinal, he's a kid who's rangy, very rarely out of position, but doesn't get the same attention as two guys that are on the defensive depth chart with him in Sherbrooke. One's Tyson Hines, Anaheim pick, who was on Team Canada along with Zach Dean at the World Juniors, and another guy by the name of David Spacek, son of Yaroslav Spacek, for those who remember Yaro in his NHL days, and also a player who played for Czechia at the World Juniors this year. Gaudet kind of slides in that 3 spot, but if he was playing on almost any other team in the league, he'd probably be number 1, or he'd be challenging for number 1. I was talking to Stéphane Julien just after the World Juniors, just after they made the trade for Marc-Andre, and my question to him was, just give me a general rundown of the players you picked up. Obviously they definitely bolstered their lineup with guys like Jacob Melanson, who's a Seattle Kraken draft pick. They brought in Gaudet. They brought in they switched goaltenders and went with an overager named Olivier Adam. And the first guy one of the first guys that Julien mentioned, he said, before the trade period even opened, he said the number 1 guy on the back end that we had in our sights was Marc-Andre Gaudet, with total conviction. He was the guy that they wanted, partly because he fit a certain dynamic. Sherbrooke is very talented in all 3 zones, but their transition game is, for my money, it's second to none in the Quebec League this year. And Coach Julien had 2 guys on the first pairing that could handle that work in Spacek and Hines. Now he's got a guy in Gaudet on the second pair that is every bit as adept. So essentially, he has got 3 defensemen on the ice for probably 50 out of 60 minutes in a regular season game or in a playoff game that can headman the puck, that can lead offense, that can be catalysts on the back end, and at the same time being very responsible defensively. And when you see the Sherbrooke Phoenix come into Halifax in a semifinal game and hold the top offensive team in the Quebec League to, I believe it was 19 shots on net in game 1 of that series in a 5-2 win, that tells you everything you need to know. Marc-Andre Gaudet plays a big factor in the ability for Sherbrooke to not only keep the puck out of their own net, but also lead the rush the other way.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah, 19 shots. I look at the shot totals for these games, and a lot of them are 47 to 42, 45 to 40. 19
not a lot
shots in one of those?
Not a lot of neutral zone play at the junior level, Jeff.
No.
But yeah, no, it's like I say, I would, if I was to pick a prohibitive favorite for a playoff champion in the Q, I am picking the Sherbrooke Phoenix. And like I say, Marc-Andre Gaudet plays a rather substantial role, even though he may get overshadowed by the Joshua Waws and the Tyson Hines and guys like that, and the David Spaceks. Make no mistake, when if they go all the way, that kid is going to be every bit as memorable, not only for the people watching him, but especially for the guys that have to face against him. They're going to remember his name. I say it's hard to say with a guy like Marc-Andre where his professional future takes him, but at the end of the day, if his junior career, especially in the last year and a half, is any indication, the fact that he's been able to make a name for himself despite very trying circumstances at the beginning of his junior career, playing through the COVID season and not really getting the exposure that he normally would. If how he's come out of that is any indication, who knows how far he can climb.
Yeah, that's impressive. Sounds like the Blues made a very good pick in the 5th round of last year. So we'll see how he pans out. But Will, this has been very insightful. I know all the hosts of this show appreciate it, especially me, and of course our listeners will love hearing this insight from you. They want to learn more. I know they will, because our fan base, our listeners are hockey mad. So they're going to want to know more about these guys. They can follow you on Twitter at Will Mac. That's MAC writer, as in a writer. And so where else can they find your work? And please talk about where you are posting, where you are talking about hockey. And I know there'll be people wanting to tune in.
Okay, well, I'm a regular contributor for the Quebec League. So that's simple. Just go to the league's website, and you will see sooner or later you'll find something with my byline on it. That's www.theqmjhl.ca. Probably see, if you don't see some coverage of me from me during the Gilles Courteau Trophy final, you'll definitely see it during the Memorial Cup, which will be in Kamloops, BC, in late May. You can also find me in the pages of the Hockey News, on occasion online on the Hockey News for written content, but largely I'm in the magazine more than anything. And on a weekly basis, you can find me at THN on the Q, or the Hockey News on the Q. It's a weekly podcast. Myself and my co-host Jamie Tozer, we do a rundown of all the news throughout the league every week, or almost every week. I think we've only missed 1 week in the past since the beginning of the season. Gained some traction, and for sure we're always looking for new listeners, but we're always looking for interactive listeners. Anybody who has questions, anybody who wants us to discuss certain players, certain teams, by all means, send your questions in You've already given the Twitter address, Jeff, but again, at Will McWriter. You can even tweet out to the Hockey News for that matter if there's any information you'd like us to touch upon. But there's a few avenues that I can be found at, Jeff, for sure. But on a weekly basis, the podcast is the main one, and a bit of writing here and there, and trying to bolster the profile of not only the league but the players, especially the players within it. There's a lot of sacrifice on their end just to get to this point. So the least I can do and my cohorts can do is shine the spotlight on them, and just give them a platform in which people can get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I know you guys had Zach Dean on this year, did you not?
Yes, we did. We had him. We had his head coach, Louis Robitaille, on our season premiere, actually. And there you can tell. I've talked to Louis about Zach quite a bit over the last 3 seasons, and Louis is never at a loss for words, which is quite amazing, because just when you think he's said everything that he can possibly say about Zach, he comes up with something else, because Zach keeps doing more and more things to impress him and his coaching staff. So for sure, we do have guests on THN on the Q. Sometimes with a St. Louis connection. So tune in. You never know who might be gracing us with their presence at any given time.
All right, I have to ask, because we're in the midst of the NHL playoffs, who you got winning it all?
Well, I'm glad we're recording this on Monday and not Sunday, for one.
Great point.
Yes. You know what? I will go back to something that I said to somebody earlier today. And I think it takes a lot for us to wrap our heads around it sometimes. There's no such thing as a bad team in the NHL playoffs anymore. I know myself growing up when it was still 16 teams in the playoffs, but there's only 21 teams in the league. Yeah, there were some pretty bad teams that would sneak through and get bounced rather early, and that it just by nature doesn't happen when only the top half of the league makes it, which makes it very difficult to make this prediction, obviously. That being said, and I will qualify this by saying, if they can get through the second round in less than 7 games, and it's not as much of a grind, I'm kind of edging towards the Edmonton Oilers at this point. I think that their toughest assignment is coming up in Vegas, obviously, and a very well-rested Vegas team that looked very smooth in taking out the Jets. But we also saw an Oilers team that was resilient. There were comebacks galore. There were, the offense kicked in when it needed to. And just when you thought it was only going to be McDavid and Draisaitl over the first couple of games, after the first couple of games, secondary scoring really kicked in. If the secondary scoring can keep producing on at least a semi-regular basis, the Zach Hymans and the Yamamotos of the roster, if they can keep that up, then they go from being a strong team with 2 deadly players to being a scary team with 2 deadly players. So I'll go with that.
That was my pick that was my pick before the playoffs started, so I got to stick with them. So we're in agreement.
Very well. Now, I did have them facing the Bruins in the final, so full disclosure.
I got the Rangers, so I guess I'm rooting for the Rangers tonight.
You're still alive. As of this recording, you're still alive.
Yep, we'll see. We'll see if that's the case when it posts. Awesome, Will. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate all the time you took tonight to talk with me and not just me, but our listeners as well. And we'll have to have you on again sometime because I'm sure we will continue to have Blues prospects come through the queue. So thank you very much.
All right. Thanks for having me again, Jeff.
Well, I again want to thank Will for his insight. A lot of, again, just so much information in that was just so good to hear. And, we got a lot from Vanessa last week. I feel like after this week with Will, we know everything about these prospects now, right? We know exactly how they're going to pan out because that's how it works. We'll see. So remember, Monday, May 8th is the draft lottery. So that is what's next up for the Blues, as we say on this show. We'll likely have a live show to discuss that. I don't know if it'll be that night or later in the week. Just stay tuned to us on social media. We'll let you know. The week of May 14th, which is the following week, we will have our first all-time team reveal show. And again, that is for the left-handed D. So do not miss that. That's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know what guest I'll have yet, but it'll be somebody from our panel. And we will break that down and talk about which left-handed D belong on the team. So that'll do it for this episode. Support for Let's Go Blues Radio is brought to you in part by RockinThatIDLife.com, where spring cleaning isn't just for your home. Let's clean up your health together. Visit RockinThatIDLife.com for more information. That's RockinThatIDLife.com, and get 10% off by emailing Dustin at RockinThatIDLife@gmail.com and tell him Let's Go Blues Radio sent you. And by Mike Burgoyne from Real Brokerage Realty. Visit strikewithmike.com today for all of your home buying and selling needs. That's strikewithmike.com. And by Center Ice Brewery, St. Louis's tasty hockey-themed beer. Check out centericebrewery.com and navigate to the Where to Find Us page for availability. That's Center Ice Brewery beer. Please drink responsibly. That will do it for episode 2 of season 12 of the original St. Louis Blues hockey podcast, Let's Go Blues Radio. That's it. Thanks kindly for tuning in, and have a great week, everyone. For Kurt Price, Bill Day, and producer Austin, I'm Jeff Ponder, and I'll talk to you next week. This was Let's Go Blues Radio. Until next time, everyone, win a damn game, Cardinals. Keep it up, City. Let's go Blues.
Sit, Ubu, sit. Good dog.
You thought I was going to say, son of a bitch, didn't you?